We love supporting and promoting the creators of musical theater throughout the world, and we would love to have your support as well. Go to musicaltheaterradio.com and click on the Become a Patron button, because a supportive community is a strong community. Welcome back to another episode of Be Our Guest here on Musical Theater Radio. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Yovanov. Today we are heading to the UK once again to speak with an actor, a director, a producer, and the owner of SimG Productions, which we'll learn more about that because they've been fantastic to us here at the radio station. I want to give a big welcome to the show, Simon Greiff. Simon, welcome.
Hello. Hi, Jean-Paul.
Thank you so much for coming on today and talking with us.
Oh, pleasure. Thanks for having me.
No problem. No problem. There's so much stuff I want to talk to you about your company, about your career. But I want to know, I ask this of every interview I do, in 30 seconds, who is Simon?
Oh, God, that is a really hard question, isn't it? Who is Simon? Simon is a husband, father, theatre director, producer, ex-actor, an all-time, good guy who's trying to do his best in the world. That's who Simon is.
That is a perfect answer for your bio.
Great, yay!
Awesome. So so there's two things I start with: the 30-second bio, and I always want to find out where it all began for you. Were you always into musical theater or theater in general when you were growing up, or is that something that came a little bit later in life?
No, very young, actually. I've got very sort of young memories of being taken to the theatre by my parents. They are theatre fans, and they took my sister and I to see lots of West End shows and plays. And clearly I was very inspired by what I saw on the stage. And I remember, or maybe I don't remember, I think maybe my mum has told me subsequently, but sort of sitting in the, the balcony or the upper circle of the theatre and pointing down on the stage and sort of saying, oh, I want to do that. I want to be on stage. So at an early age, my parents they were reluctant at first because they don't know the industry other than enjoying theatre and television and film. They didn't know the industry, but therefore they were reluctant to say, yeah, go and train in theatre. And once again, I was young, so I'm thinking about 5 or 6. And they say, well, let's just send him to some classes and see how he gets on. So I went to sort of the local dance school and I did some acting classes, and at school I was doing acting. And that took me up till sort of my early teens, when I was very strong to my parents and said, this is the career I want to take, this is the journey that I think my life should lead. And they wholeheartedly supported me in training professionally when I turned 16. So I left school and trained at 16 to be in theatre, and that started in sort of performing arts, so acting, singing, dancing, sort of as a triple threat. And while I was training in performing arts, I then felt that I wanted to pursue a more dramatic, straight theatre training and then career. And then around sort of 17, 18, I auditioned for drama school and then did a 3-year sort of London Drama School trained, acting training. So that's how it started. It was really thanks to my parents and of course, loving what I was seeing on stage.
Mm-hmm. It makes such a difference when you have the support of parents for this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember I went to, my parents they worked very hard and they sent my sister and I to good schools. And I remember my school's teachers and headmaster, when they found out that I wanted to be an actor, they, of course, were pretending to support me by sort of smiling and going, yeah, that sounds wonderful. We wish you the best. And they privately said to my parents, is this a good idea? And they said, well, this is what he wants to do. and they'd been told by professionals that I had a modicum of talent and maybe I should train and pursue it. So my academic school was saying, is this a wise idea? My parents were saying, but we think it is, because that's what he wants to do. They felt, of course, they're my parents. I presume they thought I had some talent. But so yeah, it was. But if I didn't have them, of course, there's no way. I don't see how I would have possibly gone into this industry. Them being so supportive, I might have been. I know, obviously, I have friends and colleagues in the industry whose parents weren't either supportive or weren't able to be financially supportive, and then it took them a lot longer to find their way into the industry. As I said, I was lucky, so therefore I found my way into the industry relatively young. And when I was training in performing arts, I was already doing, what sort of age? 15, 16, I was doing sort of summer season and pantos and those sort of things. And then I said, then I upped the ante and did a 3-year drama BA, a BA in acting, and they wholeheartedly supported that, and always have done, even though I've now sort of diversified and I'm now the other side of the footlights. They're absolutely behind the decisions I'm making, because in truth, I think parents have to be. You can advise and say, have you considered this, or have you thought about that? But if this way, wherever your child's heart and passion lays, I genuinely, and of course, being a father myself, feel that I think you have to support your children, and they have to find out themselves if it was the right journey. I think you can advise and suggest, but yeah. So yes, I agree, and there's no way. I don't know if I'd be where I am if my parents hadn't been so supportive.
Nice. Well, shout out to the Greiff family.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Awesome. So you went through school, you were in your teens, you decided to become a triple threat, like you said. What was the change that made you want to go to the dramatic side rather than keep going?
Good question. I think I was sort of halfway through my first year of this performing arts course, and the opportunity came up to audition for, and I don't know if it was the first UK tour, but it was certainly a really early UK tour of Cats. And I, as I said earlier, I'd done a bit of dancing as a child, and I grew up doing it, sort of on Saturday schools and evenings here and there in the week. And clearly, once again, people said I certainly had a talent for it, but I didn't really have a passion for dance. For solely dance. And I always felt the Cats, of course, everyone has to sing, and yes, everyone acts through song and dance, but I felt that really wasn't how I imagined myself. And I suppose when I whether I have that memory or whether my mum told me, pointing down at the stage and saying I want to do that, it was seeing sort of leading characters tell the story, I suppose. And I know we all have different feelings towards how important one's role is in the industry. I think everyone is equal. I think every part is equal. Every department is equal in creating theatre. But as an actor, or the young actor that I was trying to be or wanting to be, I didn't feel that I wanted to be an ensemble person. I felt I wanted to be a leading player, playing a character, a central character. And when this idea of the Cats audition came up, I was like, I don't want to do that. And then I decided and felt that I wanted to focus on text and understand character more, speaking text, rather than feeling it was anything that would then burst into song, and text sometimes becomes superfluous, depending what type of show you're doing, of course. So I felt I wanted to do something just a bit deeper, and and also to feel that I could stand my ground as a dramatic actor without the sort of cushion of song and dance. So that's sort of where it came from. And also, once again, my parents had taken me to a real sort of cross spectrum of theatre. Yeah. So I was inspired by seeing, I was very lucky. It took me to the RSC. So I saw lots of, the Royal Shakespeare Company and plays. And I was like, well, I don't just want to feel pigeonholed, because the industry, and certainly over my last sort of 20 plus years in the industry, it pigeonholes you anyway. But even back at that age, I felt I didn't want to just be one thing. I wanted to feel that I could go, well, I can do this if I want to. I can do straight theatre, or So that's why and how it happened.
Okay. Yeah. So you had a passion for plays, you had a passion for musicals, but your real passion and love was the theatre. And that totally makes sense to me. I totally understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did feel if I solely trained in musical theatre, then the opportunities of doing straight theatre, I felt at the time, that once again, this is back in the mid-90s, mid to late 90s, I felt that maybe I wouldn't get those opportunities. So, so I wanted to push myself as an actor.
Very nice. So you got through all the classes, you got through school, you got out. Now, you said you're on the other side of the footlights now. So at what point did that change? And that happens to so many actors, right? You're doing your thing, you love it, and then there's this moment that something changes.
It does. I think the moment came when I had signed a contract for, and once again, I was very lucky. I always felt I worked very hard as an actor, but I appreciate that a lot of that is also luck to get work. And I signed a contract for quite a long stint in a West End show. And after I signed that contract and started rehearsals, I had this gut feeling that this might not have been the best choice for me. And it felt like the last, because I acted for up to sort of 12 years, and the last 2 years were really tough. And I don't mean tough as in I couldn't get work. They were tough in the work that I was getting. So I was being, once again, very lucky and fortunate that I was being hired to play a role in a show, but I wasn't feeling sort of artistically fulfilled in that role. And then I signed this contract for a much longer engagement in a role that after a couple of weeks rehearsals, I realized I'm not going to feel fulfilled by doing this 8 times a week. And I think the contract I signed was 14 months.
Oof.
And so I had that awful feeling right at the beginning of my performances of how am I going to do this 8 times a week for well over a year, and at the moment I don't feel I want to be doing it. So anyway, so the story, so that is when it all changed, and it sounds like it sounds like it's something important, but I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse doing all these wonderful things that like they are at the moment, being so courageous. All I did was stuck out 14 months in a show and got paid for it. But at the time, it felt so hard. I think, and it must be a mental thing. I was just going, why am I doing this? I don't get anything from this. So it was my wife who said, well, why don't you not do it then? And while over about 10 years, while I was acting, I was also working in casting, and I'd also been going into drama schools, directing. I'd always tell people, "Oh, I'm an actor," and they say, "Oh, great!" And I sort of, as a sort of an add-on, I go, "Oh, I do a bit of casting, a bit of directing, but yeah, I'm an actor." And my wife went, "Well, why don't you do all the other stuff? Why don't you not worry about the acting if you clearly aren't enjoying it and you get no artistic sort of fulfillment from it, and do the other stuff?" So I then thought, well, that makes absolute sense, because I was starting to find more enjoyment in directing, certainly in the drama schools, and starting to work on new writing. And so that was a turning point, and that was 12 years ago now. Yeah.
Well, congratulations. I know, I went through that same moment of, do I want to be? My passion is for the theater, not necessarily to be on the stage. Right? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I do wish, obviously, the way back in drama school days, that maybe it was said to me, and maybe I was arrogant and didn't even listen to people, advising or suggesting. But if they had, I'm sorry. If they hadn't, I wish they had said to me, what else is there for you in this industry? Think about it. What else could you do? That's not saying you have to do it, or the acting won't be everything you want it to be, but why don't you consider it? And I never did. And it took such a long time to genuinely go, well, what else could I do? And then I realized actually these other things I could do are, just as rewarding, if not more rewarding, and maybe, better for me as a person, as a creative. So I do feel a little bit like, I not that I wasted 10, 12 years, but I maybe could have done more in those 12 years by doing other things and pushing myself to see if there's something else I could do in this world. But for the last 10 years, I've genuinely been focusing on my work as a freelance director and how directors then balance that, with family life and paying the mortgage and all those things.
Well, tell me a little bit about some of your more memorable shows that you directed, because I'm looking at your resume on your website here, and I see some great stuff.
That's a good question as well. Well, as I said, I've really focused on new writing. I always did as an actor. Well, when I say focused, as an actor, I really thrived on new writing because I felt that I found the rehearsal process, whether you're workshopping or doing a table read of a new play, or developing a new piece of musical theatre with a composer in the room and writers in the room, I found that as an actor really exciting. And then it got to a point where I was like, oh, I'd love to sort of be in charge of this and help sort of focus the way the writing is going. I suppose thinking sort of a dramaturgical head-on, really. And so moving into directing, I'm trying to think where it all started. There's a wonderful company here in the UK called Perfect Pitch Musicals, and Perfect Pitch have been sort of at the forefront of developing new writing. And I was working as a director, directing a drama school at the time, and they said, "Well, could you come in and direct a new piece that we're working on?" Of course, I was thrilled to come in and help out. And while doing that, it was only a few weeks, but I was like, "This is definitely the work I want to be doing." So a memorable thing that I've done, it's tricky to say because it's, as I said, it's new writing and sadly not a lot of people have seen it. But there was a show that it lost its sort of momentum, but we did a tryout in London and it was selected to be part of Nymph out in New York.
Yeah.
It's a show called Stands Tall, and it's obviously, I do believe it still had a bit more developing to be done on it, but I was really thrilled that where we got it to was then it had merit that the New York Musical Theatre Festival took it on board into their festival. So I then went over to New York and put it on there as part of the festival. So that's something I will definitely not forget in my lifetime, because as a young actor, training and going into the West End, I was like, oh, wouldn't it be amazing to be on Broadway? And then, and of course that didn't happen for me, and that's fine. Cut to sort of 12 years later, and I was like, oh, well, I might not be on Broadway, but I'm directing a little show off Broadway, so that's something to have sort of pride in. And I suppose over the years, there isn't, I wouldn't say there's one particular production, but there's certainly writers that I'm really thrilled that I've got to work with, new British sort of musical theatre writers. Trying to think of a good example. They're friends now, Timothy Knapman and Stuart Matthew Price, who have written some really, really good shows. I developed a show with them a few years ago, which I really hope has sort of a London premiere at some point. That's called Before After. I'm really proud of that. Anyway, I mean, there are other things, but as I say, they aren't of note because I don't think anyone's going to know them, sadly. But
Well, hopefully we'll be able to do something, because actually I'm talking with Timothy right now. I just had an email with him yesterday trying to.
Fantastic.
So he's going to be adding his some of his songs to the radio station. So I'm excited to hear that. And I think that was because of you introducing me to a number of creators over there in the UK. So thank you so much. Well,
my pleasure, and thank you for being so supportive in in talking to them and wanting to support and celebrate their work. It's I know you understand this, but certainly for listeners, it's so hard to get new work out there when it's not either a commercial title or a writer that people recognizes, like Andrew Lloyd Webber, or a pop writer like Cyndi Lauper. It's really, really tough, and there are some great writers all across the world. Of course, I have a lot of connection with the British writers and some Americans as well. But I appreciate how hard it is. So I thank you for your support.
No problem.
But I'm obviously doing, certainly over the last 10 years, 11 years now, I've done everything I can to genuinely champion them and support them and be part of the collaboration process, which is definitely where my passion lies at the moment.
Yeah, it's funny because when I'm on social media and I see so many people say, "Oh, I love musicals, musical theater is my life," blah blah, all that stuff, and they're always talking about Dear Evan Hansen and Hamilton, and everybody's talking about Jamie and Come From Away, but they seem to forget that those are the shows that we are talking about right now. 5 years ago, like, start paying attention to these new shows that we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think if more people, especially if we've all got, nearly everyone has got time on their hands now. So it would be lovely if people go, well, you know what? I'll give this a listen. I've never heard of it. I don't know the writers. I don't know the director. Don't know who's in it. Just to give it a listen, because there are some amazing stuff, great writers and new material and great stories to be told that just haven't been heard yet because of how people, you know, hear it and find it. It's really, really hard. So.
Well, that's why I encourage new writers to send me their stuff, and I create a show called the Sampler Platter, where I promote lots of different shows. And I'll be honest with you, there are shows that I play that some of them are incredible, and some of them are, you know, they're okay. Maybe it's just not my cup of tea, and it's somebody else's, or you know what, this is their first try, and there's a glimmer of something there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it needs to be heard.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everything needs to be heard, and people will I hope, be obviously considerate and offer constructive criticism or feedback. I just think, you know, writers, they obviously have a passion to write and get it out of their system and tell stories. Like I was an actor, I wanted to play characters and tell stories. Writers, I suppose, they're the ones creating these amazing characters. It's just got to get out into the world and be heard, and see if people respond to it, and if the story, you know, resonates with people. So yeah, it's very exciting to be part of.
Well, since we're talking about new musicals and everything, let's talk about SimG Productions, the company you started. What made you go from, you know, you went from acting to directing and producing, and then you started this company. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yes, I mean, it was by accident, really. When I made that decision not to sort of go back on the stage as an actor and to focus on my directing work, I was very lucky, and I got a job as an associate director on a big UK tour of a West End show that was touring the UK. And while I was doing that, people started to notice the transition that I'd gone from the other side of the footlights. And they were asking if my wife was going to do the same sort of thing. And I was like, oh, no, she's very happy in the industry. And my wife has been a sort of a West End leading lady on and off for all of her career, up to the point where we had a family. And so one person said to me, oh, it's such a shame she doesn't have an album. And I was like, well, it's funny you should say that, because we thought about doing it, but I don't know how to do it. And then I did some research and actually just called some friends who had done their own sort of solo albums, and managed to work out that actually one could do it themselves. So my wife and I decided that she would record an album. And at the same time, I'd been in conversation with an American composer called Scott Allen, and he wanted to do a concert in London. And because I wasn't acting, I was directing, and I was like, well, I'd like to also produce and sort of feel like I've got a hand in what it takes to put something on the stage. So not sort of doing a big musical, starting grassroots and early stages and platforming new writers. And I started with this concert, and my wife had actually selected a song she loved to go on the album. So at the same time as us, you know, giving birth to this album of hers, I did the first concerts, and I did it under the umbrella SimG, and so I called the record label SimG Records, because the reason I called it that was very, you know, it's one of those silly stories that there was already an SG Records, and it's obviously my first two initials for Simon Greiff, and I thought, well, I'll just call it SimG, because sometimes I sign off my emails SimG. So we called the record company SimG Records, and the producing companies to do the concerts SimG Productions. And obviously I know your question was about the production company, and after that first concert, which went particularly well, I then got offers of doing more concerts to introduce more American composers to London. And at the same time as the first record went out, a good friend of mine who is also a leading lady in the West End said, oh, I'd like a record as well, could you help me? So it all snowballed in 2009, all at the same time. And this was while I was working as an associate director touring the country. So it was a lot to do, but I loved it because it was so creative and bringing people together. And certainly for the concerts, I just got some of the best, you know, sort of friends and colleagues from the industry to come and sing some of the material. For my wife's album, we selected some dear friends to come and sing some duets. And we selected new American and British writing for that album. So the whole thing was just sort of a big creative sort of 12 months of my life. And that's where it started. It feels like a lifetime ago now, 11 years ago. And sort of from there, the record label continued to snowball, and the productions not so much, because that takes a lot of work and a lot of funding. I mean, obviously the records need a lot of funding, but the productions, if I'm solely in charge as the sort of lead producer, I'm responsible to find all the funds. So that sort of started to slow down. But what I wanted to do with SimG Productions is keep going with my work as a director rather than a producer. So then I started to house sort of a workshop scenario where I would develop a new piece of writing and then platform that piece in a couple of performances. So still calling it SimG Productions. So sort of like a platformed workshop, like a lab reading that they do in the States, one of those sort of things. So that's kept on, not too consistently, but sort of over the last 10 years. But the records, every I've done 2 or 3 every year for the last 11 years. So it's been crazy.
Yeah, because I'm on the page, the website right now for the records, and there's so many here, and I love the fact. I'll be honest. About 10 years ago, I thought about starting a record label for this exact same reason. I just went off and did something else instead. But I love the fact that you're promoting these new works, and obviously there's a passion for you because these might not pay for themselves for a while, right? And until they get that's very true. I mean, the records themselves go into sort of different categories, really. As I said, it started with a solo album, but I was very passionate that the solo album, once again, I know it was my wife's, but I sort of said, well, it would be lovely to include new writing. So we reached out to a couple of writing friends of ours in the industry, who I'm very proud and of them. They've gone on to do amazing things. One is a drama desk winner. One has had a couple of West End shows. So I'm very proud of those writers. Mm-hmm. And so with the solo albums, I was always sort of keen to go, well, if we do a solo album, I'd love to include new writing on it. So there's something fresh for the listener to hear. It doesn't have to be completely original, but at least 1 or 2 tracks. Mm-hmm. And then while that started, the musical company called MMD, which is Mercury Musical Developments, who are once again another big organisation in the UK, they're a writers-led organisation. They were doing a review of a collaborative show where writers had written their own song for this review show. And the Neil Marcus, who ran MMD at the time, approached me and said, would I be interested in recording the sort of song cycle review show, and putting it out on the label. I of course jumped at the chance. Inevitably, I had to obviously be upfront and say, well, SimG is not funded. I have no money for that. But of course, we were able to find funds because it was important to get the material out there, because it was celebrating and supporting the British writers that were on it. And then from there, the division of sort of cast recordings happened in SimG. And then other writers and people came to me and said, we're either doing a concept album, or a new writer came forward and said, I'd love to do a Songs of album to celebrate my 10, 15 years as a writer. Mm-hmm. So there's all these sort of divisions in the record label, and I didn't mean for it to happen. It just happened, really. And I do genuinely enjoy it. I really enjoy going to the studio, especially if it's a brand new piece, and seeing how that turns out, whether we're recording the band in a studio, or they're to created tracks and then we're layering up the track, and introducing vocalists to that. So I think everything I've learned over the last sort of 10 to now 20 plus years is all coming into the same room, as it were, to bring in the artist, to bring in a singer, to bring in a musician. And then, of course, the next stage after that, once it's all been recorded and musically produced, is then packaging it and attempting to sell it. But your question about finances, I mean, God, yeah. I mean, if I had if I was a multi-millionaire, maybe I'd be floating this whole thing and not without a care in the world. But I do obviously have worries that when we go into a new project, I'm very upfront with the writer, or whoever's come forward and said, I want to do an album. Of course, I say to everybody, well, SimG doesn't pay for it. We work for you. I'm creating the album with you, for you. It's your property. I'll do everything I can to obviously make sure it's the best thing that we produce, and then I'll do what I can to try and sell it. But yeah, I mean, it goes without saying that nearly all of them won't recoup the cost it takes to make them. But they are an important, I'd love to think all of them are an important tool in this industry to get music out there. Yes.
I mean, in the old days when you were trying to pitch your show to a producer, you give them, you know, you literally, you go to their front door or their office door and to the reception, you give them a script and a CD and go, that's my show, please somebody read it and listen to it. So, I mean, it does feel like gone are the days where people are doing that, because you can press a button on a computer and send your PDF of your script and a download of your album. But I still feel a little bit in, you know, sort of old school, where there are a lot of people who love to still have a physical CD and open up the CD and read the booklet. And especially if it's a new musical or any musical, you can read the synopsis and sometimes read the lyrics along. So I have, as you can tell, I'm very sort of keen and, you know, quietly passionate about that. And that's the sort of the story of SimG, and we're still. When I say the big we, the we is literally me, but we're still going, still sort of going, and obviously have a few more albums coming out whenever this crazy world goes back to normality.
What about a show makes you want to turn it into an album? Is there something tangible about it that you just hear, or?
It depends. So when I did the first sort of cast album, which was the MMD project, and it was called Beyond the Gate, as I said, Neil Marcus, who ran the company, knew that I was a director as well. And he said, well, we'll be doing this whole thing next year, and we'd love to know your idea. Were you to direct this sort of thing? And I said, well, I loved, the reason I wanted to record Beyond the Gate was because there are some glorious, well, it's a wonderful CD of new writing, but there were such wonderful songs in this review. I was like, I'd love to hear, I personally wanted to hear the songs again. And unless I went and bought a ticket or was invited again to watch the show, I may never hear the song again, or one or two of the songs. I was like, that's amazing. So when I was approached to record the album, I was like, we have to go in the studio. These songs have to live on in some form. And then when Neil approached me to direct the next year's review, I had an idea how I wanted to shape the piece of theatre. And then when we got all these amazing songs submitted, of course, I went, oh my God, we've got to record this as well. Because once again, I don't want these songs just to be heard for a number of performances and then gone forever.
Yes.
And even though they were essentially fringe or off West End sort of productions, it felt like, you know, there was a bigger audience who would appreciate the work. So it really is about, if I hear something and if I feel I want to hear it again, then there's got to be something, you know, my gut is there's got to be something in recording it. Yeah.
Yeah. I love discovering new shows and hearing new songs, because there's only so many times I can listen to My Fair Lady and Oliver and Andrew Lloyd Webber. And it's like, give me something new. And
well, I mean, my work originally as an actor and now as a director, I genuinely and feel that I thrive on discovery. I love it when there is a discovery that happens, whether as an actor it's in a character and you find something in it, or as a director and you discover a way through the way you want to tell a piece or a setting or the themes or whatever, and it's the discovery. And so the idea of doing it, you know, of hearing something for the first time and feeling like maybe you've discovered it for the first time and you become obsessed by the writer or the theme of the show is so exciting. I'm trying to think when the last time that happened, really. I suppose because over the years, obviously, a lot of people have very kindly submitted things to me and say, is this something you would want to record? And you know, more often than not, it's maybe not my taste. Or, as you said earlier, it might be the bare bones of something that is not quite ready to be recorded and put to record yet. And so either I offer feedback, or I do. I always, you know, genuinely sort of say it's either not for me or I don't feel it's right to record yet. And then something I think, oh God, I've got that. I'd love to hear such and such thing that in the studio. I then sort of feel like I want to push and be part of something like that. And that goes the same, you know, for my work as a director. I was really lucky where, once again, I get sent a few things and people say, is this something you would be interested in developing as a director, and help us workshop it and get people to see it? And, you know, and more often than not, it's either not right, or it's not for me, or it's not, the writing team isn't right for me, or whatever. But when I find something that I think, oh, there's something really exciting in that, it's great to help and collaborate and be part of that.
Yeah. I love the fact that there's so much stuff out there. to listen to. And because I've been going through your websites and looking at the different shows and things like that. And it's incredible how small, we have a huge musical theater community, a global one, but I'm finding out how small it actually is, because, you've got, Molly Wobbly's Tit Factory in here. You've got Tyrell on your other site. And I'm like, these are two shows that I actually play on the station, and I've discovered independently of meeting you. And one's in the States, right? Tyrell.
Yeah, it's funny you say Tyrell, actually, because I've only just been working on it.
Oh, okay.
And just so the end of last year, Alex Ratner, who wrote it, approached me and said, as once again, it was one of those wonderful emails that comes through, and I either think, oh, here we go again, or this will be amazing. And it was a really well written email. He got straight to the point. He sent me a clear link to listen to his work, and I as soon as I listened to it, I loved what I was hearing. I wanted to know more. We got chatting. He's obviously sent me the script. I read the piece, and I was like, this really does need to be heard. And he'd had the opportunity for it to be heard over in the States.
Yes.
And of course, was reaching out to British people to see if anyone in London was interested. And I sent it to a colleague, a friend of mine, who is very doing really wonderful things for new writing, and has created his own theatre on the over at Battersea called the Turbine Theatre. And he runs a new musical theatre festival that's been going a couple of years now. And so I sent it to him. His name is Paul Taylor Mills. I'm sure some of your listeners will know of his name if they're followers of British musical theatre and theatre. And I sent it to him. I said, I think this has got huge potential. And we did a workshop, a very sort of short workshop, but platformed it as part of his festival. And once again, that came to me because somebody sent it through to me. I had time to listen to it. I loved it. I wanted to try and help. And the fact that you already knew of that title was so exciting to hear. And as you say, and Molly Wobbly's Tit Factory, as it was originally fully called, is a wonderful Irish musical theatre writer, and we released his work, right at the beginning of SimG Records, and he's such a great writer and has written so many shows. I'm just thrilled how well he is doing, and to be part of that in the early stages. So.
Yeah, Paul, I've interviewed Paul a couple of times. He's one of my earlier ones, and he's a good guy and it's prolific. It's insane how much he's put out.
Yeah.
So what's next for you? Do you have something else in the in the chamber that's happening?
Yes.
Considering what's going on, I know, but
it's a very strange time, and over the last sort of year, I've been sort of juggling the idea, or thinking about the idea of do we ever really need to physically press a CDs anymore when people, of course, can buy digitally and instantly. At the moment, SimG Records is still pressing physical discs, but nowhere near in the quantity where I started. And yes, I've got 2 albums waiting to go out. And one is a solo album from Ben Stock, and we recorded his album his first album about 4 or 5 years ago, and he's done a follow-up, which is a sort of companion piece to a one-man show that he does celebrating the work of Noel Coward. So that will come out at some point soon. And there's another new show also. So this is another album from another writer I've already worked with, Andrew Fisher, who wrote a one-woman song cycle musical called Girl in a Crisis. And we released that last year. And he has a sort of family musical called The Little Fox and Other Mongolian Folktales. And we're releasing that, which is a studio recorded album of a new, let's say, family musical. So that's all been recorded. We're just finalising the artwork at the moment. So those 2 are ready to go. And we're just, as I said, we're just questioning, do we release them digitally and then see how they get on? Or do we wait and try physical first? It is a bit of a conundrum, really, because I genuinely still want to press physical CDs. I think the reason being is as I do feel there's enough theatre fans and collectors who still want the physical CDs. to have in their collection, because if it's digital, you don't see it. It just goes in a hard drive or on a computer. But if it's physical, you have it on a shelf and you can read the booklet and you can see it. So yeah, and once again, I think if we press those, it won't be anywhere near the quantity. So yeah, so those 2 albums will be out, I'd like to think, you know, in the next month or two. And theatre work, obviously there's no actual theatre work for me as a director, as with everyone in our industry, until the foreseeable future. As a director, I'm lucky that I can do some work with students. So and I know a lot of people are very, very familiar with Zoom at the moment, and I believe you are. And I'm getting used to the idea of doing sort of virtual classes and coaching. And thankfully, I'm starting a directing project next week where I'm directing individual students as doing one-person musicals for their final assessment. So yeah, so that's what's thankfully coming up for me. So it's not as terrible as I know some poor colleagues who at the moment have nothing. But yeah, it's a really strange time, and it feels like everyone's diversifying really quickly to find a way forward in the times that we're now living.
Yeah, I feel like I know as a society we've had to take a step back, but I think because of this taking a step back, we've discovered new things, which will take us, you know, almost 2 steps forward in the future.
Yeah,
because we will go back to live stage, but we have this now as well.
Yeah. I just think it'll just be another area that will go, you know what, we can get enjoyment and creativity from this new area. And of course, I absolutely understand there's a lot of people that have always been or have been working with digital work for a long time, you know, coaching online and coaching internationally, but sitting at home in front of the so that and the idea of getting work out digitally. The amazing National Theatre, of course, have been streaming all their shows on, you know, a lot of their catalogue on YouTube, and which is also helping raising funds for a lot of really important charities and, you know, to support our industry through this terrible time. And I'd love to think that maybe, as you just said, that we're learning from that, and actually there is we can continue to do that. You know, I can, and maybe, you know, this time next year, when I pray that we're all out of this and we're back to some sort of normality, that actually I could still tune in to YouTube and watch, you know, a filmed theatrical performance. That's not going to stop me going to theatre. It's just going to go, it's another outlet to see amazing work. So yeah, so I hope, and I genuinely, I know this is a bit more of a humanity question, I just hope we all learn from this and you know, we all become better people for it.
I hope so too. There would be some people who won't, but I think the majority of us will become better people.
That's true.
Well,
I hope I'm better for it.
Well, you're doing great stuff, so you're on the right track.
So
you're very helping so many people. Simon, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me today and telling us all about the SimG Productions and what you've done. Because I loved when I forget, I can't even remember how we connected. I know with social media.
I think it was the wonderful world of social media. Somebody tweeted saying, "Do you know this album?" And of course, it was one of my records. And I think we got chatting, and it was as simple and as fortunate as that.
Yeah. As much as I hate social media sometimes, I've made so many great connections. As long as you just choose the right ones to connect with.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree with that comment.
Cool. So before you go, though, I always ask my guests 3 questions. There's no right or wrong answers to it, but there is one wrong answer. So just be prepared for that. All right. So question number 1 to you.
Yeah.
No context. Weber or Sondheim?
Sondheim.
And why?
Just I fell in love with his work as an actor, his storytelling, and now as a director working on his work. Obviously I have to comment on his book writers and how phenomenal they are, but it's a gift to actors and directors, his work.
There's no right or wrong answer to that one. That's more of an opinion one, so I will accept that. Correct answer. All right.
Yay!
Question number 2. Do you have a favorite cast recording, and why? You know, was it that it was perfectly reflected the show? It was just the people on it. And it doesn't have to be one that you've produced. Just in general, a cast recording.
God,
Doesn't have to be the best show. Just
you know what? I can't answer that question, and it's because you can and anyone listening, and you probably already guessed. You know, clearly I'm a fanatic, or a fan of musical theatre and care about recordings. I've got thousands, and I just I can't answer the question. I don't have a favourite. It's a bit like you asking me to choose between my two children. It can't be done.
I won't ask out loud, but in your head. And we won't tell them that. But okay, no, that's a legitimate answer. It's hard to choose because there's so many. But okay, then let's modify that question. Digital, well, obviously, I think digital or hard copy of a cast recording.
Well, you know the answer to that question. It's digital, and it's because I'm old school. I used to go into the one record store that in the UK that sadly, of course, is gone physically. A shop called Dress Circle. I'd go in as a teenager. I'd buy a cast recording, and actually, once again, it'd be something I probably never heard of. I'd pick it up. I'd buy it. I'd take it home. I'd listen to it, and I'd read the booklet. I'd read the synopsis. I'd read all about it, and get to know what it was and who the writers were. So always physical, for me.
Totally agree. I've been buying some digital, and I'm like, this isn't the same, because I can walk into my office and go, there's all my records, there's all my tapes, and there's all my CDs. What do I want to listen to today?
Can I give you an example of that?
For sure.
A quick example, and this is not to answer your question on favourite cast album, but I will not forget the day that I bought the original Broadway cast recording of Passion, and I took, and it was before there was the DVD or video release of the Broadway filming. So I'd not seen it, I'd not heard it, I'd heard of it, I'd heard, of course, it was the latest Stephen Sondheim musical. I'd heard it was slightly different from what we were used to. And I took it home, I put it in my CD player, and I read the booklet as I listened to the story, reading the synopsis and the lyrics, and I absolutely appreciated why that made a difference, because I understood the story, I went on the character. If I just put it into the CD player, I'm sure I would have gone off and done other stuff and come back and missed 2 or 3 tracks. I might not have had a clue about the story, but because I followed that, I felt like I was there, living this live theatre, so that's an example of why physical for me is still so important.
Yeah, I just got one, and it had a digital booklet, but that's not even close to the same. I want something in my hand, something tangible. Maybe I'm just old school like that.
So am I.
Nothing wrong with that. All right, and finally, most important question.
Yeah.
Audience members eating food in the theater, yes or no?
Oh, no, absolutely not. Well, you can guess my answer to that question by the way we've been talking over the last sort of half hour or so. No way. I mean, a theatre is not a restaurant. A theatre is a place to enjoy what you're watching in front of you, not to eat your chips or your popcorn. Or no way. Crazy.
I love asking that question just because of the passion behind it. Every time.
And also mobile phones. Put your just turn it off. Or I think we should check them in at reception.
For sure.
Just check them in. Just, what's the point in going to the theatre if you've got your phone in your pocket and you check it every 10 minutes?
Yeah. Maybe there should be a little thing on every ticket that says, if your phone goes off, the usher has the right to take it and crush it under their foot in front of you.
Wow. Or the old days when those mobile phones were like a flip, you could just crack it. Like a drug deal. Just crack the phone and say, there you go. Enjoy the rest of Act 2.
Should have read the fine print.
There you go.
That is the correct answer as well. Perfect. So 3 for 3. I will accept the middle answer. That was good.
Thank you.
Again, thank you so much, Simon, for coming on, talking to me. All your support online, because we are starting a contest, a quiz, and you guys are the sponsors for it because you have donated kindly cast recordings as the prizes. And
it's my pleasure.
Yeah, the more people that get to know the works that you put out and these new shows, I think the better for everybody in the long run. So I want to say thank you so much for all your support.
Oh, you're very kind. No, thank you. Thank you. I'm thrilled to be the sponsor. I think it's a great idea. And as you say, I just hope more people get a chance to listen to the work that I'm trying to support and champion and get out there.
Awesome. We need more people like you. in the industry. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was Simon Greiff here on Be Our Guest on Musical Theater Radio. Tune in next week as we'll be talking to another guest or guests about their life, love, and passion. That is musical theater. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Jovanoff. And until next time, I'll see you when I see you.